Hello and welcome to Overwatch Database and another one of our Power Rankings episodes. Today we have our post-Summer Showdown Power Rankings, so this is taking into account everything from Stage 3, including the Hawaii matchups and the final. And this is kind of our Power Rankings following that, heading into Stage 4, where we think the teams stand. So jumping right into it, we're going to kind of glance over the bottom like 4 teams real quick, because at this point, these are teams that aren't going to make the playoffs, aren't going to have really an impact on the season, and might not even win any games the rest of the way. So number 20, as they have been all year, we have the LA Valiant sitting here at 0 and 12. They're not going to win a game. We're not going to spend any time on that. Number 19, the Vancouver Titans. And then we have at number 18, the London Spitfire. They are kind of interesting because they are both 0 and 12. However, week 2 of the Countdown Cup, we see both these teams play each other. And we might have another toilet bowl on our hands. That's going to be exciting. And we will actually see one of these teams pick up a win this year. And then number 17, the Guangzhou Charge, sitting there at 3 and 9. They're a team that can pick up wins. Obviously, they have 3, but they're probably not going to have much impact going into the final stages of the season or, have any ramifications for the playoffs whatsoever. Now, getting into number 16, we have the New York Excelsior. This is a team that you could argue maybe could be higher. They have a 5 and 7 record, and New York's an interesting team. I think they have a lot of really good pieces. They picked up Kalios. He's looked really good. I think that Flora has been, probably the most standout rookie on the team. Feather has had moments and shown he could be a DPS player to build on going forward. I think that, Jonak is playing at a very high level still. And all in all, it's a pretty decent roster that if you get a couple changes going in the next season, I think could actually really contend. And a new coaching staff, because I feel like actually the coaching staff they have is not very good. And I feel like if you get a better coaching staff and a couple, upgrades on this roster, you could be looking at like the second best team in APAC next year.
Right, and talking about coaching staff, I feel like coaches are an integral part of being able to counter other teams' comps. I feel like a lot of coaches have teams run weird comps that the players actually don't feel are going to work, but they think it's going to work in the moment, and it just throws the team down a bit and causes them to lose fights. So I think a reorganization of coaches would actually help a lot of teams out, especially Excelsior.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. So number 15, we have the Florida Mayhem. They are 4 and 8. And they are far and away the most disappointing team of the season. Going in, I think we had them I don't remember our first power rankings. I want to say we had them like 5th or 6th, but a lot of people had them really high. I mean, they were a really good roster last year. And a lot of people have been trying to point to something like what's caused this, because they have a good roster. Some people are like, oh, it's OG on, main tank, different things. But all in all, I don't really think there's really a specific issue you can point to. I think it's just that the league has gotten so much better and it's so much more competitive. I mean, Florida got 3rd in the May Melee. They looked really good at the beginning of the year. And I think the league's just gotten so competitive. They definitely shouldn't be 4 and 8, though. There are issues there, obviously. They should be better, but I think more than pointing to individual stuff on the roster, I think it's just somewhat of the league has gotten better. Number 14, we have the Boston Uprising. 6 and 6 record. They're a weird team. They have a lot of rookies, a coaching staff we're not really sure about. But it feels like at any given week they can beat anybody and then also lose to anybody in NA. They are a very odd team. They feel like they have a lot of potential, but honestly, I put them 14th. You could put them higher, but at this point, are they really going to live up to this potential with a stage left? I don't think so. And then number 13, we have the Toronto Defiant. Also 6 and 6. They kind of feel similar to Boston to me, not just because of the record. I think that it's also coaching stuff that I actually trusted going into the year, and I think has disappointed. And also the roster's kind of disappointed. Aspire has literally come in, on his 2 30-day contracts and literally just keeping this team afloat in the playoff race.
I'm surprised they're still doing 30-day contracts with him. Why not full on sign him to a team? Are they trying to figure out a team for him to be signed to, or are they just going to try to keep him there? He is such a great player. Why has no team actually full on signed him yet? That's what I want to know.
I think with so little left in the year, it might just be cheaper or something to do 30-day contracts. They'll probably keep him the rest of the year, and he'll just probably be on 30-day contracts. But he better find a team next year, because he's been really, really good. So hopefully that happens. Number 12, we have the Hangzhou Spark. They have a 7 and 5 record. You can make an argument. I think a lot of people would make an argument for them to be in the top 10. But as you know from previous, episodes I talk about it, I don't like inconsistent teams that show up one week and don't show up the next. An example of that is the Seoul Dynasty, who I ranked out of the top 10 for a lot of the year. And they're just so inconsistent. Shai's been really good, don't get me wrong. As a rookie, he's come in, he's right in the, Rookie of the Year conversation, even though personally I would give it to Pelican. But he's been right in there, and they've looked really good. at times, and then at other times you're just like, they lose to New York in knockouts to go to Hawaii. Like, it just makes no sense.
So I know you're not a fan of this idea, and I kind of want to get an idea of why. So with Spark having 10 players on their roster, with 4 supports, 3 tanks, and 3 DPS, why not, split it into 2 teams with, I don't know, 3 or 4 coaches, Because you can have, like, 2 coaches do like one split and 2 coaches do the other split, and you can have like an alternating roster in a way where you can have one set do like a rush comp and the other one do like more of a brawly comp. Like it's like right now you have Pushpeng and U4 as the coaches. Why not bring Mentalist and Noru back? Like I know Mentalist is retired, but bring him back to maybe do like a split coaching kind of thing. I mean that's just something I think might work for the team, and I know you don't think it will, but I kind of want to know why you don't think it will.
Typically I just think like subbing out like main tanks and like main supports is typically like not a good idea because they're like your shot callers of the team, and you want to play with the same ones consistently to like build synergy and stuff. I think I'll give you credit, like if there's one team that could do that and maybe make it work, it's this team, just also because they have such a big roster. But yeah, I don't know. I honestly think that the Hangzhou Spark are just doomed to just waste all this talent. Like I don't think they're gonna ever figure it out. I think they really need to just blow this team up after the year, unless they can hire like a well-known great coach. Otherwise, just call it a day, break up the team, start over. So number 11, we have the Paris Eternal. 6-6 record. You could probably argue they should be lower, but I put Paris as high just because they've overperformed expectations so well. Not to the level like the Houston Outlaws, but this is a team that's also lost players during the season. They had to pick up Fistola, Dredro, people like that in the middle of the year that have played really, really good. I think for all the hype that their main tank Don got, he's been okay. I think Khan, the support, has been better. I think he's been really, really impressive. I actually think he should be in the Rookie of the Year conversation. And so overall, just the team in general has overperformed expectations. I think Naga and Onigod is a much better DPS line than I thought. They might not like hard carry, except maybe like Naga and Echo is really, really good, but they're not going to exactly lose you games either. And I think that's really all you can ask for, considering, what we expected of them going in. So getting into the top 10, we have the Philadelphia Fusion at 7-5. They are a really hard team to place because they've been looking so bad, at the end of the Summer Showdown, but at the same time, they're integrating all these players that they were missing at the beginning of the year. I kept them 10 because I have some hope in the coaching staff and in these players that they're going to figure it out and just click the rest of the way through the year. We'll know, I think, right off the bat in Stage 4, I think. But I'm really holding on, to some hope here that they're going to figure it out, get these guys in there, and just click and be a dangerous team. Because, you kind of feel like if they had all their players at the beginning of the year, they would be one of the best teams in the league. So it's just a matter of time, if they can integrate them into the roster before it's too late. Number 9, also with a 7-5 record, the Atlanta Reign. That one I feel like is definitely going to be controversial. I think a lot of people would put them higher than 9. They've been to Hawaii twice, and they haven't won a single match. They did come really close this time. I think they took Dallas to a map 5. But the fact of the matter is Atlanta gets there, and then they kind of show you that they don't belong there. I think that it's a team that I actually believe they've reached their peak. Honestly, I know a lot of people are like, man, if they just reach their peak, they are an elite team. I actually think they've hit their peak this year. I don't think they're better than that. I was really low on them coming to the year. I put them like 14th in my power rankings at the beginning of the year, which I'll admit was a little low, but I don't have faith in the roster, and I don't think they get better than this. I really don't. So going ahead to number 8, the LA Gladiators with an 8-4 record. Also a team I think a lot of people would argue should be higher. I've never been really high on the Gladiators, even in the preseason. I put them several spots lower than most people. I don't even know if I had him in my top 5. I've never trusted DP as a coach. I don't think he's a terrible coach, but I don't think he knows how to get the most out of his roster. And they clearly have not got the most out of this roster. Because going into the season, I did look at the roster on paper and think that's a championship roster, and I do. I don't have faith in them to get the most out of it. And so that's why they're number 8. They haven't even made Hawaii yet. And I think at this point of the season, we're getting so close to playoffs. You have to kind of, I don't want to say favor teams, but I feel like you kind of got to give the edge, and put your trust in teams that have gotten to Hawaii, because you're going to need that experience and that, mental fortitude to be able to get past knockouts and get to Hawaii in the playoffs. Those teams that have gotten there already are the teams that are going to be the most comfortable, in those situations when we get to end of season playoffs. And the Gladiators haven't gotten there. So they give me no reason to believe they would, just magically at the end of the season. At number 7, the Seoul Dynasty. 9-3 record, so technically they're tied for the second best record in the league, though a lot of people are 9-3. There's like 4 teams with that record. But I have them at 7 because, again, at this point in the year, I'm going to favor teams that have shown the ability to get past knockouts and make Hawaii and even win games. Seoul has not done that. They've had some really good stages. I think they've technically been like 3-1 or something like that every stage, and they just can't get the knockouts. They didn't even have to deal with Shanghai this time, and they couldn't beat Chengdu, who, granted, looked really good in the Summer Showdown. But, the Dynasty just have not shown an ability to win big games. Getting into the teams that I believe are actual threats, I think come, end of the season. Number 6, the Chengdu Hunters. That might be a little bit of recency bias because they are 7-5 overall on the year. But I think if we're talking about power rankings and we're kind of looking ahead to stage 4, and at this point we're banking on teams that have shown an ability to win big games like knockouts, and in Hawaii, Chengdu has done that. I mean, they just got 2nd place in the Summer Showdown. Yeah, they lost 4-1 in the finale, to Shanghai, but I think that they still showed us a lot of good things, and I think it's a roster that's clicking right at the right time. And I really do think this team is a real threat, come into season playoffs. They've beat Dallas, they almost beat Shanghai. So I think it's a team that has shown an ability to play really close with the top teams in the league and even win, one against Dallas. A couple standouts that I want to shout out. Monk, who's been playing like a lot of Zenyatta and stuff in the Summer Showdown, was absolutely just fragging. He was playing so good. Yveltal was playing really, really good on like Brig and stuff. Leave obviously was just pounding on like Tracer and stuff. Leave always does though. He's been fantastic. Just really the whole team has been clicking. I think even the tank line, Elsa retired and they had to pick up, they put in Late Young and he's fit in really nice. And so just really the whole roster is just clicking at the perfect time. Getting into our top 5 with a 9-3 record, the San Francisco Shock. You could probably argue they could be higher, but again, they haven't been able to make Hawaii, and I really put a lot of stock into that. I think that the Shock, they don't feel like they have a championship mentality, and I really don't have a lot of faith in them to figure it out in the last stage of the year. If anybody could, it's Krusty and the Shock, but at this point, I think it's time to just, see the Shock for what they are. On any given day, yeah, they can beat anybody, but they're not a team that's going to get, I don't think, to end of season playoffs and just rattle off, win after win against top teams and, even get to the championship, in my opinion. So I think there's a really strong chance we see somebody else in the grand final this year.
So we did talk about this in our last recap video, how we think that their performance is a mental thing, where they'll win like a number of games straight, and then they'll start falling down, and we're like, well, wait, how are they losing now? What's going on? Because, throughout the entire course of, the Overwatch League, the Shock's been like the top team kind of thing. Like, people are like always high on the Shock, and I think that, that whole mental thing is probably what's causing them to not get into like these final tournaments, basically, and they'll start dropping down after like their second game or something like that. If it's like if they start off 2-0 and then they'll go like 2-1 and 2-2, you're like, well, what happened there? Or they'll maybe go 3-0 and then suddenly it's like, wait, oh, we're losing now? Like, what? The Outlaws beat them. It's like, what? Yeah, it's a mental thing, I think, honestly.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. So number 4, the Washington Justice. Might seem a little high, but again, this is a power rankings. And if we're talking about teams that seem to be like picking up, some steam and figuring it out right at the right time, I think besides Chengdu, I think the Justice are, a really great example. They started looking really, really good at the end of the Summer Showdown. They had some really close matches against a couple of like really top teams. And all in all, the Justice just look like they're really figuring it out at the right time. And I think going into this final stage, they're a real threat. I still think they're a championship caliber team. And I think as long as we don't see any regression from them, they definitely deserve to be in the 4th spot, in my opinion. You can make an argument for a team or two behind them, but it's more of just the trajectory they're on has me kind of believing in them a little bit. And then number 3, this is going to piss people off, Houston Outlaws. But before everybody just freaks out, first of all...
Oh, and actually, so even I, as an Outlaws fan, I do not think Outlaws should be 3 in these power rankings. Maybe 4 or 5. Definitely not 3. I don't think they're actually good enough to be that high on this. And I'm just like, why? Why?
Okay. So I know what I've been saying like this whole time is, I'm putting teams higher that have shown an ability to get to Hawaii and stuff. And I know Houston has not gotten to Hawaii. But when you look at what, Houston's done this year, They've beat the Shock twice. So why would I put the Shock in front of them? First of all, they've beat them twice. And I know they haven't gotten to Hawaii, but first of all, they ran into Dallas when Dallas was at their best this year, 2 of those 3 times. Okay. I don't have an excuse, for the Summer Showdown. But the first 2 times they had to run into Dallas. Okay, so that's just, a bad luck. And then you look at before that, I mean, they were 9-1 until the last week of the Summer Showdown where they lost 2 matches. And granted, yes, they lost to the Boston Uprising, but the other one was to the Dallas Field. So they really only have 1 bad loss on the entire season. And that was to the Boston Uprising. Other than that, they beat the Shock twice. They beat Dallas this year in the regular season. Like, they have really good wins. And up until that last week, they were 9-1. So I know they're 9-3 now. But I think overall, if you're going to look at the most consistent regular season team that has not made Hawaii this year, it's Houston. I think they've been more consistent than the Justice. I think they've been more consistent than the Shock. I think they've been more consistent than the Gladiators even. And those are all teams that also haven't made it to Hawaii. So I think at that point, you just got to look at who's been the most consistent. And also, it really comes down to coaching because I really like Harsha and Junkbuck. I think they're great coaches. I think Houston's finally, they're playing the right comps. They stopped taking Juby out and putting Jake in on Brig and stuff. Like, Juby's been actually playing the Brig. They seem like they're making the right decisions with the roster. So I think going into stage 4, they're on a good trajectory, and that's why I have them at number 3. You could definitely make an argument they shouldn't be. I totally understand it, and I'm sure a lot of people are like, what the hell? But personally, that's how I feel about them. So number 2, the Dallas Fuel. A 9-3 regular season record. They have a stage, championship under their belt this year, winning stage 1. And then they lost to Shanghai in stage 2 in the final. And then they got 3rd in the Summer Showdown. So kind of a weird trajectory for Dallas. I don't really know what to think of them going into stage 4. I still think that, they're the second best, team in the league. But are they the favorites going into, into season playoffs now? I think there's a definite argument to be made that they're not. But they're obviously still, I think one of the top 3 favorites. But they've kind of been dethroned a little bit on that top spot where they were for half the season. And that brings us into number 1 in our power rankings, I think, as they were last time, the Shanghai Dragons. So they have the best regular season record at 10-2. No one else has double-digit wins yet. That will change in the Countdown Cup. And also, Shanghai has 2 stage titles now. For people who didn't know this, Shanghai is only the second team joining Season 1 New York to win back-to-back stage titles. New York did it in Season 1 in stages 2 and 3. And Shanghai just did it in actually stages 2 and 3, which is kind of funny. I just realized that. But they are only the second team to do that. If you look at stage titles overall, Shanghai has 5 as a franchise. The Shock have 3 in second place. So that's really incredible, especially for a team that started their foray into the Overwatch League 0-42. That's quite incredible. So Shanghai number 1, I don't think there's really an argument against it, by anybody at this point. They're clearly the best team in the league right now, at least going into stage 4. I think Dallas has a chance to regain that in stage 4 and kind of, at least pull kind of even with Shanghai in terms of it's a toss up between the two. But I think right now Shanghai is definitely better, and Dallas needs to figure out a way to counter the ball high runs because they just play it so well, and Dallas does not know how to counter it.
Now, with this next stage coming up, do you think the Hunters would be able to be into that top 5? And if so, where in the top 5 do you think they would end up being?
That's a really good question because I was actually going to ask you what your thoughts were on the power rankings. Was my next question. So I think the Chengdu Hunters do have a chance to crack into the top 5. It really just depends how stage 4 goes. So if you take a look at the standings, Chengdu is actually tied for the second best record but they're tied for second place in APAC with 9 points. So they have 2 less wins than Seoul, but getting second place in the Summer Showdown got them 2 league points. And so they're actually tied for second. So I think for Chengdu, it really just comes down to how they play in stage 4. The top 2 teams in APAC get an automatic bid into the playoffs. So that's really interesting. Chengdu has an opportunity to do that. So looking at their schedule, they play the Guangzhou Charge, New York Excelsior, Hangzhou Spark, and Los Angeles Valiant in that order. That's a potential 4-0 stage. I think the toughest matchup in there is definitely the Hangzhou Spark, but I think those are all winnable games. So if you're Chengdu, if you at least go 3-1 and you finish 10-6 on the year, I think that's probably good enough to get second in APAC in that automatic playoff bid, because Seoul has a much harder schedule. And at that point, yes, Chengdu enters the top 5, I think, at that point. Where, I don't know. It really depends on how the Shock and, Justice and teams like that perform, but I think they would definitely get into the top 5. So yeah, looking at the rankings, is there anything else that really like stands out to you, Connor? I think that people might argue Houston and Justice are a little high, maybe Gladiators are low, but again, I just, a lot of that is just based off, the teams that have shown ability to win big games and get to Hawaii.
Yeah, I do think Outlaws and Justice should be a little bit lower on that, and maybe like Gladiators and Reign a little bit higher. But I totally agree with, Dragons and Fuel being first and second there, Shock being fifth, Hunters being sixth. Like with the games that the Outlaws, the Justice, Hunters, Gladiators, and Reign have been like playing there, those are, I think, the teams that are probably going to be the most changing in power rankings and, comps throughout the season and everything like that. Like, I think Dragons, Fuel, Shock, and Dynasty are pretty locked into, the positions they're in right now. And I think those are really good picks. I think the other ones I mentioned are going to fluctuate a lot.
I think another team to keep an eye on, even though their record's terrible and they've been on a losing streak, is the Florida Mayhem. Because we know they should be better, and they still have one more stage to turn their season around and make it into qualifiers for playoffs. So I think that that's another team that could change a lot if they can, like, kind of, figure things out and go, like, 3-1. You would see them jump up a lot. It's unlikely, but I think it's another team to look at. So that is our post-Summer Showdown power rankings. Heading into the Countdown Cup, coming up here in about a week and a half. And I think that's all we have for you guys. As always, thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for notifications. You can check us out on Apple Podcasts. And we also, as we stated in our last video, have a website now you can check out where we have a blog. We have all our videos on there. We have a merch store, stuff like that. So go ahead and check that out. The link for that is down in the description, as well as the Apple Podcast link. Make sure you guys tune in later this week. We will have our recap episode of the Hawaii games, breaking them all down and breaking down the final. And then next week, we have a really special episode for you guys. We are going to do not only our predictions for the first week at the Countdown Cup and those games, but we're also going to have another episode for you guys. And we are going to do a top 10 rookie ranking video, just ranking the top 10 rookies from the season so far and talking about them. Even giving you our picks on who, like, the Rookie of the Year favorites are and stuff like that. So that'll be coming next week. So make sure to watch out for that. And as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.